Hey guys, welcome to Testing Academy, and this is a part 2 of API testing using Postman series. And in this tutorial I'm going to explain you what are the different type of HTTP methods and how you can do practically different type of HTTP methods, especially in Postman. And we are also going to cover a little bit about authentication and cookie. So let's get started. So what you're going to learn more about what are the different HTTP methods that I have discussed earlier, and what is authentication and different type of cookie basics, and how exactly the HTTP works, right? So let's understand what is HTTP. HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol, right? It's basically if you understand it very clearly or a practical word, there is a client, there is a server, and they are using a particular kind of a transfer protocol that clients want to send a request and server wants to respond back to it. So it's a protocols set of rules over the hypertext, you can say hypertext protocol, whereas clients can use certain kind of methods, the methods known as get, post, put, patch, delete, right? These kind of methods to communicate with your server, right? As you can see in the client is that HTTP client can send a request using to the HTTP server, and they are communicating using certain kinds of methods, right? So this is known as HTTP transfer protocol. It's a stateless protocol. Basically means that whenever client sends a request, so server after responding back to the client, it just forgets about it. Means it doesn't know what kind of information particular client has asked, right? So in a simplest manner, let me explain you in the simpler diagram that there is a client which is a browser. You go to a website like www.com, google.com. What happens is that you made a request. It's a get request to get the documentation, to get the resource. The resource resides on the client sides, and you made a request. So after requesting the client will respond back to you that this is a response and this is a document that you want to see. So here it is here, right? So over this, whatever you are seeing on whenever you are typing URL and whatever, seeing that google.com, it's happening over that hypertext transfer protocol. What you can do in the URL, if you think about, so URL consists of different kind of entities. It's very important, guys, to understand. The first one is HTTP. Why we mention HTTP? It's a protocol, so we are using HTTP protocol. So right now, as you can see, there will be HTTPS, which is a secure version of HTTP. And what you have to mention in the second part is your host name. Host name can be your domain name, and it can be an IP also, right? And after that, you have to mention port. By default 80 is used, so whenever you type google.com, by default port is not shown, but you can use a different ports if you want to use certain different services, right? Then you have to mention the resource path where it is resides. So if you don't mention anything, then default value of index.html will be fetched. But if you want to get a particular resource, you have to mention the path by slashing into like a directories, right? And also you can mention certain kind of query parameters that you want to send to a client. For example, I am going to send a simple parameters that I want user ID 1 and the name should be Pramod. Then definitely it will return you my details. So server will have a kind of a understanding that what query parameters are basically coming. So this is how a simple URL structure works on HTTP, right? So we need to understand what are the different types of HTTP method. This is like one of the, probably you can say in API testing, most of the time the questions are around this HTTP methods. So as we are basically understanding the REST API, we need to understand these methods especially very carefully, and we should have certain kind of hands-on, right, to understand these kind of methods. So if I give you a brief overview, that's a theoretical overview of this one. If you are making a get request to a server, it's basically to request a page to read a page kind of. And similarly, when you are doing the head request, it's a request to read a web's header. What kind of header information are there? For example, if you make a request of a head, you can get the details, different kind of details, what kind of page it is, what kind of expiry it has. So all the headers kinds of information will can get using only the head method. Will not get any kind of body whenever you're using the head method. Similarly, put you can use to store a web page, post you can use to append or create, and delete you can delete a resource particularly, and trace basically it's a echoing of incoming resource. We are going to understand this concepts practically in Postman. Just get an overview what exactly it is. The important one is options, which basically query what are the different kind of HTTP methods this server supports or this request supports, right? And there's another called as connect, which basically reserved for future use but doesn't have any kind of implementation right now. So and another important thing that we are talking about the HTTP, that is hypertext transfer protocol that we are thinking, it's that informational status code. Whenever you are sending a request, the server is responding back to with a certain kind of responses, which is known as status codes. Though if we are getting a response related to the 100 series, it's informational response, that information about okay whatever it is. And second one is successful. The 300 series is redirections, 400 series most of the time it's client errors, and 500 related to the server errors. The most like few of the HTTP status code definitely you have known, like 404 not found, 500 error server error, or 200 okay response, 204 created response, 307 redirections, 301 redirections. Definitely you have heard it, this term different kind of status code while you are learning something, right? So these are the HTTP status code, nothing else. These are just certain kind of HTTP status codes. Okay, so we need to understand how to view HTTP traffic, right? So as I told you that we need to understand practically. I'm going to do this stuff right now practically in front of you. We are going to this URL. This is api.myjson or any with a particular URL. We can go to anything URL, and we are going to go to the developer tools of a Chrome to understand what exactly kind of different HTTP requests they are using, right? Cool, that makes sense. So let's do one thing. Let me share my screen. All right, now I have shared my screen. So let's do one thing. I have a particular get URL here. Let me copy it and do a particular request. If you go to this URL, we can click on right click and inspect in the Windows, and let me do this thing. And if you're on Mac, there will be a particular shortcut also, right click and inspect, and there's a particular shortcut also to go to this. You can go to this network tab and just refresh it. As you can see that there is a particular request going on. If we go do this and go to the headers part, we can see that it's a request URL. The request URL is this, and what kind of protocol we are using right now, it's HTTPS, right? And what is the domain? Domain is request. And what is the resource path? It's a path is API/users, and the query param they are passing is page is equal to 1. So all the things are clear, right? And we are using a request method get, and we are getting 301. 301 is what? 301, if we go to again our slide, then 301 is basically it's a series of redirections. Okay, so after redirection they are giving certain response, right? And there is a remote address, basically the IP of this resource, and here it is the major information about it. So whenever we are sending a request, we send certain kind of request headers along with it, this request. These are methods we haven't sent, right? But these are actually appended by browsers, right? So we have passed certain kind of request headers, and we are getting certain kind of different responses from the server. We got that SS control, different kinds of key value pairs. These will be key value pairs. What is a caching mechanism, means what is a cache, and what kind of things the service, basically it's the server is made in Express, so they are mentioning about that Express, what kind of encoding they are accepting. And in the request also we have basically mentioned that we are going to expect as a test XML, JSON, anything related to this thing, we are going to accept it as a client. And the language accepted is US, different kind of header. These are the headers, right? In upcoming tutorials probably we are going to learn how to add our own headers to authorization or cookies. You can see the cookie also, right? In the request we have mentioned certain cookies value. Cookies I'll explain you in this upcoming in the next part, right? So this is like a practical example. and only the get response we can, most of the time we can see, make using the browser. If we want to make a different kind of request like post, put, patch, then we have to use our favorite tool, Postman, right? We cannot make them using Chrome as of now. Probably in the future we can, right? So let's do one thing. We can just go to any different URL and see what kind of request they are doing, right? Okay, before starting we can just go to inspect, go to network tab, and here we are going to facebook.com, right? So first request, it's a get request, and we have some redirections here with the 307, right? And after redirecting it, we have again redirected using a get request, right? And like three major requests. After that, we are redirected to HTTPS version of Facebook, which is giving a 200 status code. There are like different requests going on as a get. As you can see, most of the requests are get right now because we are just getting certain kind of responses, right? Let's do one thing. Let's go to scrolltest.com and see if we have certain post or not. So basically we are interested in certain post request. Okay, so there's no, there's not a until most of the time post requests are generally created whenever we want to create something or we want to send something as a creation part of it, right? So most of the requests you can see are get request. Oh, there's a post request. Once again, yes. So this is a post request which is basically going to this URL, and we have a post request, and whenever we are sending a post request we need to send certain kind of body to it, and the body we are sending right now, it's a form of form basically contains you can say key value pairs, and here basically certain kind of fields information are sending along with this post request, right? Let's do one thing. Let's understand this using this example, and we are going to our favorite tool, Postman, right? Get example I have already told you about in the previous tutorial. What you can do, let me give view that again. So you can go to this URL, and we are asking the different kind of users, and we are asking the first page of the user. We are going to send the request, and here it is. We have a response. It's in JSON. JSON is nothing but it's a key value pair. This is a key, then this is the value, right? I hope that makes sense. And so now what we are going to make a post request. So if we go to this URL again, and there is a syntax for post, what you can do there, you can, the endpoint is same. We are going to plus icon, and let me do one thing. Let me teach you one thing. You can save this request, click on save as, and here it is. We can mention that get request, and here we can mention list the users. Okay, list the users, we can mention them into a request, and you can create a one collection users. This is our first collection, and we are going to add this request into this collection, right? Now we have one request as a get. Cool. Again we are going to get, we are just modifying it to post, and here it is, the endpoint, and here we are just mentioning the URL as a post. Suppose I do the post empty, I'll get a response that 404 no found, right? Because there whenever I want to post to this URL, sorry, this again I have to remove this one. Whenever I post do empty post, it will basically return back me that it's created. So right now this API is not properly handled. We haven't sent any kind of body into it. Still they have created something with the ID, right? We can get this information also, and if we go to get a single user, right, similarly it's similar to this. We can just go to duplicate, and here they have you can go to this, and we can mention the error, and it will be an empty response, right? Yes, it's a 404 not found. Why? It's API users, right? And we have created one user, right? Let's see. Right now it's giving us error because we have created empty user. Let's create one user in this server, on this server, and we can use raw and go to JSON. And right now I'm going to create my own user promote as a job as a leader. I'm going to click send, and here it is. A user is created and it is mentioned in the response. We have a status code of 201. So 201 is created, and we are going to get this user right using this URL. And here we have this. Let's remove it, and here it is, the response. Okay, we have slash error. Okay, it is not giving us the response. Why? Let's get a single user, not found. Two, we have created one, right? The ID is 953. It should work. Let me see 1 second. All right, so guys, it's a fake API, so that's why it was not able to create it. But you get the gist that basically if you do a post request, it will give you a ID, and you can get the response using the ID. For example, if what I have done is that I have just mentioned what is the I want to get the results of 2 ID of the user, and here it is, right? And we can save this request. Right now I just get user with ID and save. We can save it as create user, right? So now we have 3 requests. What you can do interestingly is that how you can use the environment right now is that we don't have to mention this again and again, right? We can just do this, and we can create new environment env, and variable name we are going to use a URL. Initial value we are going to mention everything as the same, and click on add and close, right? And in from drop down just select the environment. What you can do is now you can use this variable now as your request. Okay, now if I do again, okay, these are like double, right? It will become colorful if you see, and it will work again the same one. Now what you can do, you can replace all the request.in variables with this URL. Cool, right? And it will work the same as same, right? So 2 method we have seen. We have seen get method, how get method is working, how post method is working. And let me tell you about different things. You can pass the parameters also with the, if you want to send certain kind of parameters, you can pass ABC, and the value can be CDF, right? And basically it will be like as a query parameter if you want, if your server supports it. Sometimes we need to support them. Authorization I'm going to cover in it. Means you can pass any kind of different kind of authorization. For example, if I want to pass a basic authentication, for example, this server is only allow this only allow to create a user only if you pass certain kind of authentication. So I'm going to pass admin and send it. Right now it will just give you certain errors because this server doesn't respond. But if we have basic authentication set to this server, then definitely it has responded back with this, that okay, this is a correct one. But without user and password, if the authorization was there, then it will be an error, right? Again, the headers, there will be certain temporary headers which are automatically added by certain, you can say, browsers. And most important one is the authorization. If you are saying it's a base 64, like there is a base 64 of our username admin username and password. It's getting it's getting sent into the temporary as a headers, right? In headers the information about the authorization was sending, and these are like headers. You can add anything you want. For example, if you want to add accept we can mention JSON, we accepts only JSON, whatever it is, like key value pairs we can add. We can now this is the important one, we can have like different kinds of body we can send with the post one. You can send form data. Form data generally means for example, if you have seen that there is a sign up form. For example, if you go to facebook.com, there's a sign up, create first name, last name. These are like form based. You need to enter the names of this key value pairs and their value, and directly for this endpoint you can create the resource. You can use X. These are like encoded form of a form. These are like raw that we are using right now. Raw is basically as it is, with only mentioning that JSON it's a JSON request. You can pass binary, basically any kind of file. If you want to select any file and send to it, for example, let me send this file, and you can send directly. Right now it will give you error because this doesn't support. And you can do GraphQL queries also to this URL, and I have covered this into my Testing Academy YouTube channel. You can go to this, you can write certain GraphQL queries and GraphQL variables along with it, and do a post request according to it, right? GraphQL is a little bit different from REST APIs. It's a, you can say, more advanced version of REST API right now. Cool. So that's what the post request, that's how you do a simple post request into Postman and GET. I have already explained to you, right? Let's do another type of request, which is put, another important one. And what you can do, same, it's a very similar to post. We can do is like duplicate this request, and we just mention it too. And here for the put, basically we are doing is that we are just putting a user, and we want to kind of, you can say, totally replace this entity. The user2 was already created on the server, but we want to completely change it with these values, more name, Morpheus, and job this, right? And what you can do, you can go to this URL, and again the URL is same. It's very similar to the post one, and where we are mentioning our response is a different one, right? And now I'm going to send a put request. It basically responds back me that okay, that I have made the change. Similarly, and let me rename it. This is a put, so let's save. So it will change to put, right? Similarly, patch request. If patch request is basically, it's very similar to post, but only if we want to do certain kind of minor changes. For example, in this example, it's changing name and job again, but what we can do is, only if we want to only change name, then we can leverage the patch request. Patch is like small patches. For example, only want to change name, only want to change job, similar to post, and only changing certain values is patch, right? We can do send request, and again only it will change only the more, you can say, only change the value of name field, doesn't change the value of job field. That's a patch request, right? Oh sorry, I have made a put, so let's do patch. Okay, right? And here it is, patch request, right? Okay, let's duplicate it and change it to put, so that we have put also, right? So we have post, patch, and put. Similarly, we can delete the resource, but just need to go to this URL again. Let's copy, duplicate it, and we can delete it. We don't need to send anything in this, just mentioning that delete the user2, that's all, with the delete STPP method. When we do this, it's basically going to respond that no content deleted, whatever it is, right? And it will give us a response of 204, right? So these are like most important functions. If you think about a CRUD application, create, rename, you and update or delete. So most of the functions are created, are already covered. You can create a head request also. For example, this is a GET request. I'm going to change it to only head. If you do this, you will only get the headers information, right? There is a no body, right? So this is how head works. If you want to get only the header information, then you can use the head options. You can call this function to get the results, means what kind of options it's supported. So basically sometimes they reply with right now it is not implemented. It's they are going to reply you that we are supporting for this request, get, put, what kind of different options we are supporting. And different kind of another requests are coming, like purge, lock, and these are like very new ones. We don't need to use that, means we are not extensively using it, but uh, you can try it out with different kind of links if you want to learn more about them, right? So let's understand so these are like very much STPP methods are covered. So let's understand what is authentication, right? So authentication is basically is a process by which the credentials provided are compared to the file of a database, and we basically are, what we are doing is that we are authorizing a user. For example, if I want to create a Facebook profile, and I have created a particular profile and want to log in again, right? So this is like web authentication. We are going to pass certain kind of authentication, certain kind of information that okay, I am Pramod, I have this username password, please log into my website or log into my Facebook, right? So I'm going to pass certain authentication. That's how authentication works, right? Authentication can be like different types. The first one can be like no authorization, where there will be no authorization. The another like basic authentication, it looks like this, where you are just passing your username and password as a base64 encoding. For example, I have a basic authentication where I just need to pass admin as my username password, and it's going to convert it into this format, authorization basic 54, and it's going to be embedded into the headers. So server will read that okay, in the headers the username password is coming, okay, basic authentication will work, right? And another two important author type of authorization that I want to cover is that digest is authentication by transmitting password into encrypted form, which is much more secure than base64, because that base64 authentication password can be seen directly if we convert the base64 into decode, if we decode that base64, right? In the form based, you can pass as a username password, basically you most of the time there's in the Facebook and all these guys are using form based authentications, right? And another type of authentication that I need to show you like here is that digest I have covered. You need to pass username and password and certain kind of information related to your server. These information, yeah, that you can get from your server information, that what is a RAM, what is a nuance. Nuance is a kind of a you can say a key to secure your username and password, any count, and you can mention these details, and after that you just do a send request and it will respond back to you. If your authentication works, then digest authorization will be work according to it, right? In the bearer, it is very similar. It's you have to mention a particular token to get authenticate to a server, right? And in basic auth you need to enter username password, we have discussed. And another important one is auth1. Auth1 you need auth1 and auth2. Basically these kind of requests are used by certain services like AWS or certain kind of authentication. For example, Twitter, I guess they use auth1 and auth2, and GitHub sometimes use auth2 to authorize a particular user, where you have to mention certain kind of key, secrets, authentication token and secrets. The server will, whenever you create a new profile or any kind of APIs generally used by certain kind of APIs, where you have to get this information to get authorization, right? I would suggest you to go to this scrolltest.com and scrolltest.com and click on this read button, and I have like explain these all kind of different kind of authentication in this tutorial. Let me give you this the link. Let me see, it will be here. I would suggest you to go to this scrolltest.com. I have like put lots of different extensive tutorials for this, how to handle authentication in Postman. Means this is an awesome tutorial I have written, and I believe it's awesome. And I have mentioned about every kind of authentication and how to do that into your Postman. Basic auth, Hawk, even digestive of how it works, NTLM authentication, Hawk authentication, and other kind of auth kind of AWS signature, even bearer token, different kind of all kind of different authentication I have covered in this tutorial. Right now this tutorial is little bit long, so we are not more doing it now. So we need to understand one more concept, which is cookies. So cookies basically means that it's whenever server receives an HTTP request, and you can send a set cookie headers. It will be sent into a headers. So it's basically browser puts into a cookie jar where it's a you can say cookies are basically certain kinds of information which basically servers use to identify the clients, right? You can use the cookies for authentication purpose also, but they have like an incompatibility with the REST APIs, right? And what you can do instead of cookies is tokens are like very much probably used, as you have seen in the slide, that authorization barrier, these kind of authentication tokens are used right now to do certain kind of authorizations. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching this long tutorial, guys, and I hope you understand it. The next tutorial will be more in depth about different kind of how practically more we can do advanced stuff in Postman, and we are going to extensively create a small framework around the Postman. So I hope you are liking this kind of tutorial, guys. Please let me know about the feedbacks, and I would suggest you, this is a like assignment to you, to that just go to these resources that I have mentioned in the slides. Just play around with the Postman, how do certain get request, post request, and play around with the APIs. You will understand more and more about them, right? So thanks a lot and have a nice day.